I just booped the record button.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Blue Collar Philosophy. I'm Robert, and for some reason, I'm introducing today. This is Mr. Chris Jordan.
That was my idea.
Yeah, he just flew down or drove down.
I did drive down. I took the drive down in my car, so now I'm here.
Crazy person. I don't think I could handle the drive that long, and I drive all
I
day.
I did it in stride, and I was only mildly sore when I got to my destination. So I can't complain at all.
Need a good solid butt pad.
I did not get a good night's sleep, but I'm a ball of energy, so I'm used to that.
That's okay. As long as you're ready to go, man.
I am ready. Oh, Robert, what are we going to be talking about?
Well, the fact that you put the atheist in charge, or the show.
Oh no, the atheists actually put themselves in charge.
Oh,
I'm joking.
well, end results
You
the
can take
same,
that
so it's fine.
multiple ways.
Oh my gosh. So today, we're going to talk about Anselm. He was a medieval Italian cleric that came up with the ontological theory for the existence of God. Before we go into that, I kind of wanted to talk about what a philosophical argument is versus what a faith argument is. A philosophical argument isn't believing what you were taught. It isn't anthropology. It isn't your psychological reasoning for your belief. It is the logical, deductive, or inductive reasoning behind something. So we're going to work out what Anselm logically deduced would be a good argument for the existence of God. And this is back in 1033. So it's about 1,000 years ago at this point, and it's been used in religion and religious countertext for the entire time. So what do you know about the ontological argument? You've gotten into this a little bit.
I have studied this topic. I studied it years ago. It actually is what saved my faith. So while I may not be up to all the terms, I understand the concepts. So even just starting out the philosophical argument versus the faith argument, I think you could almost reframe that and look at it as present information versus past information. So the way faith is actually described in Scripture, at least the Bible, what it means is I have good reason to believe based on past experiences that this will come to fruition.
You could argue that is like an actual deductive reasoning, though, that's from the ground up.
Okay, so how do you separate the two, though?
Faith is just believing it. To me, faith is believing without having some kind of reason.
No, that's not how it's used in the. You know who did that? I'm sorry if I came off as aggressive. You know who actually had a really bad blowout about that is Aaron Ra. He's a YouTuber.
Yeah, I know.
He didn't know. Like if your primary thing isn't religion, I'm not going to fault you if you didn't know that. That's fine. But if someone actually demonstrates to you, like, no, this is what the text actually says, this is like what it means in the original language, and you just say, no, read it, faith, and he would just insist on this definition. It was weird, man.
My understanding of faith comes from Kierkegaard's Leap of Faith, where the reason that faith is important is because it's necessarily absurd. I don't use the term negatively.
Oh, yeah.
Faith is only important because it's something you have to believe without necessarily having the logic.
You don't see the landing.
Right.
You don't see the landing.
That's why it was important to him. That's why it was beautiful to him.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason I'm not into it.
It almost seems like some people are risk takers, so they're more prone to acts of faith, right? They can visualize it and see it. I can see how it could be, and I'm just going to take the chance.
You know who's taking a chance?
What?
All the people in Las Vegas aren't wearing masks at the dang casino. Did you see that?
I did not.
They opened up a lot of the casinos and they're full. Nobody's wearing any PPE.
Oh, dude, I went down to Destin today, madhouse, and you know what? I don't even care. So I'm sorry if you. Actually, I'm not sorry if you feel ways about that, but I don't mean that in a mean way. Just I am very free.
That's okay.
Yeah.
As long as you're safe, man. I think it was funny that I saw that many people. I was like, dear God.
Well, I mean, I think, okay, even before the restrictions were completely lifted, I'd walk into stores. So half the people would have the mask below their nose.
Most of them.
And then, like, you would see some people that didn't have the mask on. I'm walking in the store with the mask. I'm like, okay, I'm not pretending.
And not if everybody else isn't going to play by the same rules, I guess.
No, it wasn't that. I'm not pretending that this is actually helping anything. That's what I said.
I know it helps.
Yeah.
I've got some masks.
In certain situations, I
Yeah.
think it completely helps. Going around shopping, if you're practicing the social distance thing, don't worry about it. Like if you're going into a high risk area or something, and
It's important.
It's just use your head, but you're trying to address variables of situations by applying a unilateral rule.
An abundance of caution is okay. When I drive the taxi, I'm inside
Abundance
a
of
closed-
caution is okay until the data feedback tells you differently.
I haven't seen any data feedback tell me that I shouldn't be abundantly
I'm
cautious.
seeing it lived out, man.
Well, that is your experience. Mine's just a little different.
It is. Okay, so I'm not denying. I didn't expect to get on this topic. I'm not denying that COVID was a thing and it was a serious thing. But it was a paradox because it was a very serious thing for a small amount of people. And then you had certain areas of the country that were just absolute hot spots. You should not go.
They still don't know.
I ain't going in, like I wouldn't have gone to New York. You can miss me with that. I mean, they were having so many people die. They were burying people in public spaces. And my gosh, like,
Iran has no medical facility.
who is pro-government at this point? Like, seriously, this is what they come up with. We could think of better things than that. Golly.
Yeah. A loose construct of people that all disagree, but they have to get reelected, so they need to argue for their base.
Well, is there a giant head ant directing all the other ants to do what they know they need to get done?
No, they have an instinctual guide, right?
We do too.
Yeah. Yeah, but our head ant is...
See, well, okay, so the thing is, the head ant thing is actually what you might call artificial, or it's learned behavior. So it seems natural, but it's not. It's normal, but it's not natural. That's why people react the way they do. You realize how much energy you have to put into to get their attention? I'm not saying we as in any of us did it, but we in the grand sense had to burn cities down.
Oh, yeah.
Or not burn cities, but you had to do that just to get their attention. That is not a good investment in time or energy, but it was necessary.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that tell you something?
But
That's feedback. That's information. That's experience.
Yeah, we had a rally, or a march and a gathering in Crestview and in Defuniak. They were both very peaceful. The police were there with everybody supporting them, so hopefully at least something positive comes out of that.
Well, no, political action has its place because it's the loud voice. It's not like that's not called for. I think what the mistake is, you can make the right laws, but if the people don't change, it's a cycle, man. You're starting to cycle over again.
We could completely rehaul the police department, but if the police are still acting the same, then that's a problem.
Well, if just people in general are not taking their inner world seriously, they're not tending to their own gardens, you might say.
It's funny
You're
because
going to get the weeds.
we're going to talk about a garden today in the show, actually.
Are
Isn't that
we?
weird?
Let's do it.
Isn't
I
that
love
weird?
gardens.
So, Anselm again, born in Canterbury 1033, as an Italian cleric.
God, say that again.
Anselm? It was a medieval Italian
where he was
cleric
born.
in Canterbury.
God, I love that. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know.
So his argument for the ontological argument, as it's come to be known, is that God is a thing that which nothing greater could be conceived. So basically, God is the absolute best thing. Think of the coolest thing, God's better than that. So his argument is, if you imagine an imaginary thing, and you think, wow, that's great. If it was real, that would be even better than the imaginary version. So therefore, because God is the greatest thing, it must be real, because the imaginary version would be less great. I know it's hard to.
No, I actually think it's backwards. I actually think the imaginary thing is greater because you can get enjoyment regardless of present circumstance or physical reality.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with your thought process. I'm just leading you down his.
Right, but I think
that.
so. I think it's the other way around. So I think the true treasure, I guess you would say, is not the physical things, because the physical things are just expression of an inward reality. That's why the emotion or the idea or the essence of whatever you see is greater than what you see, even though what you see is gorgeous.
So you would have a really good refutation. It's too bad you wouldn't have, there were a lot of people.
If I could have only gotten to Canterbury, what time period?
Oh, we're talking about the 1000s.
Oh.
He died in 1109.
All right, guys. I didn't expect the show to be this short, but I got to get going, I guess. Okay. I got to solve the world's problems with this counter argument.
Well, and this is just the first argument for God that we're going to talk about. We're hopefully going to have other videos where we talk about the cosmological and the teleological argument for God.
See, that's even a weird argument, even if I take his premise. It would assume that if I see something that I cannot even imagine something better. And then, what am I actually saying? I'm denying my own experience because I can actually imagine something greater than what I see.
This is what the refuters actually said. So it starts with, I'm going to say his name wrong, Guglielmo is a French monk that was refuting him. He said, simply because I can think of the perfect island doesn't mean it exists. And because you see something you think is perfect doesn't mean that there's something in reality that isn't more perfect than that. You just haven't seen it.
Yeah, so, that's a weird. It's
philosophy.
It's philosophy, but you notice it flows so easy into the end. It's like jerks you. You're like, what? Huh? There's something greater in reality? And that's an argument against God or for God?
It's against the ontological argument.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying he was arguing against God. He was just saying
he was trying to poke holes in that argument.
Yes, he's saying your ontological argument, he's essentially begging the question, which is a fallacy that we have to talk about. Begging the question assumes the very thing you intend to prove. It's like a circular logic situation.
Oh, yeah.
So Anselm said that
you have to have the idea to refute an argument that there is the ideas are inferior.
You have.
I mean, that's kind of what he did.
That hurt my brain. Yeah. Anselm basically said that God exists because he is necessary, and he is necessary, therefore he exists.
Yeah, which is okay. So he's just taking circular reason, which I don't agree with the circular reason arguments, obviously. But But then again, the circular reason arguments do serve a purpose, even if they're wrong.
Sure.
They get you thinking.
They do, and they did for 1,000 years. People still talk about this.
Oh no.
I mean, we are.
Yeah. So two grown men are sitting inside on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, talking about this stuff. I mean, that's crazy. It has some staying power.
It does.
Well, okay, so here's the interesting thing about philosophy. All right? In the science tradition, science does get better over time because you get more and more information and you can refine it. Philosophy is not the case at all. And oftentimes it's actually the reverse. Sometimes modern philosophy, if you actually listen to it and then you study old philosophy, you realize all the fallacies that they're using.
Sure.
It's like, whoa.
But just like science, as we have new philosophers that come up with entirely new ideas, it does evolve. Like the pre-Socratics believed in a monistic version of reality, where like everything was created from water, or everything was created from air. Mm-hmm. And then you move on to Socrates, who didn't necessarily nail it down to one thing creating all of the universe. Pythagoras believed that the atom, that was where the term atom came from, believed that atoms created the universe.
Atom's a singularity.
Well,
you can look at it that way.
He didn't really know what it was, but he said it's stuff.
Yeah, but it's all it is. It's a starting point. an idea. That's all it is. It's one. It's a starting point. It's an idea. It's one thing. It's how could you have how could you have a refrigerator if you didn't have the idea for the refrigerator? And what if you saw the refrigerator and then denied the own idea of the refrigerator that brought it into being? That doesn't make sense.
Well, somebody else made my fridge. I didn't make it.
Isn't that like cutting your nose off to spite your face a little bit? I don't know. I mean, but you see what I'm saying? That thing, you know damn well that thing would never have made it into the physical universe if not for the idea.
Sure.
Why is anything different?
Well,
how would that be different?
Are you saying that because everything has a cause, kind of like...
No, it's not a cause. It's just that that thing could not come into existence if the idea for it wasn't real, independent of it.
Right.
Independent of it.
That's where we get to
It has to be independent because it's the starting point of everything.
Well, sure.
Is the idea and then energy and information.
See, I didn't create trees, though, but I have them here.
Right?
So are you arguing that that's an argument for the existence of God? Because...
Okay, well, in quantum physics, a particle exists as a wave until it's observed or measured, and then it becomes a particle. It becomes solid.
Sure.
So what is that telling you? That things are not as solid as they appear.
We were talking about the materialistic and the immaterialist worldview, and I had to argue for the duality.
They're holistic.
Because of quantum physics, the idea that a particle acts differently when being observed. They even did a study that showed that a particle acts differently when an observer is being observed. You know what I mean?
You're getting multiple energies,
right,
so it's affecting the form.
Well, different perspectives.
Different perspectives, but you got to understand your mind is sending out energy. And I can explain this to you in a sense that it's not going to sound spooky. You can have your back turned and somebody mad walks into the room and you can feel it. What's that? And we can actually scientifically prove that we have a sixth sense that we are being observed.
Human antennas.
What's that? It's energy, guys. That's all.
So...
Well, it's more, but that's what's happening. At the very least, that's what's happening.
I need your help going over this because I don't. No matter how many times I say this, this hurts my brain too. So, Anselm's argument back to the objection was that the greatest conceivable island, right, the one we just talked about, the island that we can conceive of, but that doesn't mean it exists. He says the greatest conceivable island is not the greatest conceivable being. And this is the necessary part. He says that a non-existent being is unthinkable. A non-existent island is conceivable. If you cannot have a mental concept of a non-existent being. Therefore, because you can't think of something, a being that doesn't exist, God must exist. But
as
an atheist, I believe that God doesn't exist and I can conceive of God. So that doesn't...
I think this is some people, I think, have a natural bias just because of their personality, and there's no judgment on it. You just have a bias to a certain thing. Maybe you're more like objectively minded, or maybe you're more artistic and more idealistic. You're perceiving the same information differently just because you have literally different perspectives. So this is what I drew out for Robert. So I did this in another video. This is the different perspectives of reality. This is the 1D, the 2D, and the 3D. So from the materialist perspective or worldview, what we would call consciousness, or the phenomena of consciousness, real or not, is emergent from the mind. So that is the vantage point of what they are viewing and filtering and interpreting the information. However, I think that it's actually more like this. So actually your mind's right here. This is your consciousness, and it's like a projector. So you have your consciousness, the observer, the I. They have a bunch of different symbols throughout history of what this actually is. And you see it on currencies and stuff too. It's interesting why occultists do this, and they're usually rich people in power. They figured something out. Okay. So from here, you have your mind, or your energetic body, or whatever, your energies, but it has the information about the idea and the energy and the momentum for it, and then from there comes the 3D world. So it's really, if you're doing philosophical arguments, it's whether you want to acknowledge this or not. If you want to deny this, your argument makes perfect sense. If you want to block that out, yeah, I can see the problem. That's weird. That's a paradox. No, it's not. It's not a paradox. It's just one whole thing.
So that the 1D being necessary?
The chicken or the egg is not the problem because they both exist and you're observing it.
The law of non-contradiction, a thing can't be its own opposite?
Things are their own opposites. We self-sabotage. We do that in behavior.
Yeah, but we're not talking about just the existence of a being, though. Or
Okay.
the existence of a...
Okay, I'm just saying, at the very least, whether you think it's real, what I drew out, you may not do it a lot, but this is actually your experience. So the way I describe it, video games are actually a very good representation of this. Because they have different perspectives. You have first person, you have third person shooter. So for a theist, life is more like a third person shooter. There's like distinction and separation between, their mind and their body and what we would consider ourselves. And for more empirically minded people, it's more like you have your face really close to the steering wheel. That's not bad. It's just how you're doing it. And you're not wrong because you're not getting wrong information, but you're viewing it different. And the analogy that I use is that just because you can bring a microscope to a paint gallery doesn't mean you should. Or maybe if you did, you could enjoy it in a different way. You could actually put paint under a microscope, see what it's like if you're interested in that thing. But primarily why people go to paint galleries is just to experience it and enjoy it. They're not different things. They're not different information. You're just, there's different data at different perspectives.
Sure. But Kant would say that existence is a predicate. Like, you can't use existence as a defining property.
How are you going to refute existence?
Well, we just don't like, this exists, but I don't use it in describing it. I don't say, well, first of all, this exists, and second of all, it is yellow. You know what I mean? Typically, when describing something, we assume its existence based on being able to interact.
But think about this. We know that space and time are emergent phenomena. They're not essential. So what are we really talking about? If it exists, it exists. There's no time about it. It's now, man. That's all there ever is. So what are we really talking about? We're trying to go down the rabbit hole. There's no rabbit hole. Things just are. I like to think of reality, what we're experiencing as 3D in time and space, is actually a 3D projection of like basically a giant tapestry of 2D information and energy. It's like a video game. We just happen to have the perspective from inside.
You're saying there's a programmer or somebody playing an avatar, almost.
We replicated it in our own reality. Instinctually. Who thought of that idea? Why? That's weird. Why would we do that to entertain ourselves? Why would we make movies?
Fun to watch. They explain
it's adventure. We want to be told a good story.
Sure.
But we also want to experience. We want to live a good story.
But is your belief, now we talk about belief being you're talking about belief being predicated around some form of experience too, right?
It's informed, yeah. So what I would call belief, or actually more specifically faith, because everybody has belief in faith. But I'm going to use the word faith because it's more thought of in the religious context. Okay, and that's my perspective.
Okay.
All right. So go ahead.
Have you ever heard of John Wisdom?
Not off the top of my head.
It's a philosopher in 1944 that talked about the invisible gardener, and he says that two people walk into a garden, and person A says, wow, this garden looks great. There must be an invisible gardener. and you'd be person A almost, and I'm person B. I'm like, why would you believe that? So they lay out traps, they bring in bloodhounds, they do a lot of different tests, and every time they do a test, person A is like, I don't know, he's just intangible, or he's invisible, he's intangible, and person B goes, wait a minute, what's the difference between an invisible, intangible, not guy that? What's the difference between that and not that? What's the difference between something you can't see, touch, smell, hear, or interact with, and something that doesn't exist at all?
You're the invisible gardener. Because you're in first person.
Well, I'm talking about the actual things in the garden changing every time they leave.
Right, but I think that's a metaphor for you're the invisible gardener. You deny your own your experience.
That's one way to take it, but they didn't experience the garden changing. They just experienced when they came back
but
they
what they recognize is intentionality of another another sentient being, whatever you want to call it. Like, we can recognize intentionality. We can recognize chaos or destructive things too. We can recognize atrophy.
Sure.
But we do recognize intentionality very well. Why do you think it takes so much energy to hide things? You ever think of that? To cover up something?
What does that happen? One of these guys is believing that there's a God.
Because something happened and it's self-evident.
But to one person, it's just nature. It's the normal course of just being, or like animals showing up and eating stuff.
Right, from the perspective, it just appears as nature. It's natural.
Yeah, but other person
it doesn't mean that natural and intentionality have to be separate. And in fact, I argue that that's impossible.
You would. I get that. For you to believe that there's God, you would honestly have to believe that there would be some intentional...
just using the mind that I know I have and that I possess, I know that it's impossible to have an idea, or not to have an idea for something and it come into existence. I can't make a refrigerator without the idea for it. I can't make the song without the idea for it.
Sure, but human beings have the ability to create those ideas, right?
No.
Well, no. God didn't develop the fridge. A human being did.
I know. But what's an idea? What do you deny? Like, you're attributing the idea to your mind.
Yes, that's where ideas come from.
They don't. Inspiration. Okay. The only reason that we know about relativity is because Einstein got it as an entire idea. Who would even think of that?
Well, he spent his whole life up to that point.
Yeah, he put energy and momentum behind it, and then
sure,
it came to him as a whole thing. There was no thought involved. There was thought leading up to it, but what he was actually talking about, what he actually realized. See, you don't think of stuff, you discover things.
So Plato talked about the innate knowledge that certain people have about the universe and the laws that exist. You ever heard of the Meno?
I don't think so.
He talks to a little slave boy, and he has the slave draw out a square and divide it into 4. And by the end of it, the slave boy can explain what the square root of that is. Not because he learned it, not because anybody educated him, but because it was just a law of the world, that there are some things that we have innate knowledge of. Is that more what you're describing?
There is a sense that we do recognize laws in the universe and how they operate.
Sure.
However, it doesn't stop at that. I can say something that has to do with morality, and it doesn't matter what perspective we have. We both shake our heads because we know it's true. We don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
What is that? Okay, so
I argue survival instinct for morality, because we're a societal creature. We get together and
it's deeper than that, and you know it.
Well, I mean, instinctual belief is the deepest, isn't it? I mean,
what I'm talking about. So, have you thought any more about consciousness? Because this really affects like the whole entire conversation. Because if we, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I can argue from the mind, from the perspective of the mind, perfectly fine.
Okay.
And you can argue from the state of them being separate and consciousness being a whole like thing. But in doing so, you're using your mind, and your mind wants to bring itself back into the head. driving into position, even though you have the experience of your mind
Mm-hmm.
and yourself being separate.
I would just have to say we'd have to agree to disagree, because we've talked about this a few times.
It's not a matter of experience. You need security. You need to see it enough to trust it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that.
Right, but at the same time, you know it's real.
I know I'm real because I'm.
No.
I'm
Yeah,
real,
you're calming
but-
your mind.
Sure.
That's not a bad thing. That's actually a form of self-care, and I recommend it.
Mm.
I mean, science is great. It's improved our lives so much. And in the same sense, you being careful and needing to see and trust things, even if your inner being, you know it's right, it's not wrong to take precaution. So to me, that's what science is. It's a form or perspective of thinking that doesn't leave things to chance. But that doesn't mean that if you only experience something, say once, randomly, it happened.
Sure.
You can't explain it, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Sure. But even Einstein said that his belief in, or his work in science made him believe in God more because it gave him this cosmological feeling, this feeling that he was trying to understand the way that the plan worked or the way the universe was constructed.
Well, you know
that
why?
I appreciate.
Because philosophy is actually the basis of the scientific method.
Oh my God! Yeah, everything started at the academy.
Yeah. I mean, it's so I would almost say that denying philosophy is like denying your own consciousness.
Right. Philosophy is just a conversation.
Okay, because you have thoughts. Thoughts come and go. Thoughts change. But ideas, whether you believe them or not, they stay the same. So you're almost, if you deny philosophy, you're almost denying consciousness in the sense that you're denying your ability to observe these contradictory and varying ideas and that you could actually make a choice.
I will say philosophers can't even fucking agree on what philosophy is.
But here's the irony.
I know.
It cannot be any other way.
What?
It couldn't be any other way.
What do you mean? What can't be any other way?
Philosophers, for philosophy to exist, they can never agree.
They would have to be arguing all the time. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
No. For philosophy to exist, they can never all agree.
Sure.
Because it would just be one thing if they all agreed.
Right.
There would be no distinction. There wouldn't be anything.
The history
That's what you don't
is
get.
all the students end up arguing and trying to prove their teachers incorrectly, thinking that their teachers are too simple-minded. And everyone from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle and on, it just keeps moving and moving where they build on the ideas of the prior.
Sometimes you don't want to actually build on the ideas. And here's why. Sometimes when you make things too complicated, they become unstable.
Like the legal system?
Correct. It's the old saying, if something ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's why when Descartes got into his period in the 14 or 1500s, he worked backwards and went, the only thing I can know for sure is that I exist. And once he got to that period, he started building on things that he could prove based on that.
Well, take your personal life for example, and it's gonna be a weird example, but you'll understand when I get there. All right. So the simpler oftentimes is the better. So you have family coming over.
Occam's razor.
You usually just hug them and say, hi, how you doing? Easy. No one would feel the need to complicate that. And if they did feel the need to complicate that, it would make the environment unstable.
Thanksgiving.
Right. So I'll do that sometimes, but I'll do something bizarre to shock people and then make them laugh so that they'll relax. But you gotta gauge the energy. You gotta gauge the barometer. So if I take it past that, which is already a little bit more complicated than it needs to be and uncomfortable, then you can cause some real instability. Because then I could slap each of my guests, and that would really complicate things if it get unstable.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm talking about? You're adding unnecessary things. This is why dogma is so destructive and unstable.
I will agree that dogma is destructive.
And I say that as a Christian. And I love Scripture, and I will talk about it with you all day. But if you're dogmatic and you can't even do the mental practice of putting yourself in somebody else's perspective, have fun. I am not talking to you. There is no point. I will not do it anymore. I will not argue with you on Facebook. I will wish you well and turn around and go somewhere else. I'm not watching while you have a conversation with yourself.
This is why we try to do these,
Yeah.
to have an open kind of conversation. Whether or not we're actually going to change anybody's ideas, we do open the conversation
Okay,
up.
so take this, right?
Mhm.
So maybe we're different personality types and we work together, right?
True.
But for some reason, I was like, okay, I like Robert, but he's an atheist. And you have ideas about it.
Yeah.
And same vice versa, right? If we're not open with each other so the information and energy can flow, my fears about Robert will dissipate because, like, oh, that's Robert.
Right.
It's just Robert. And the same thing. And that's how our relationship started. But you see, like, if you get dogmatic and information cannot be exchanged and travel,
Everything shuts down.
you can't find truth.
Same thing with atheists. There are a lot of really, I guess, virulent atheists that would not have good conversations.
Everything is in constant motion. Even at the coldest temperature, atoms are still moving. Everything's in constant motion.
Not at 0 degrees Kelvin, but I get what you're saying. I get what you're
You cannot resist the flow of information. And if you do, you'll be hurt by it. And other people will be hurt by it.
I just like having these because I want to show people that atheists aren't awful, satanic, liberal, just whatever kind of
Yeah, if you're
term you want to put
liberal,
on
you
it.
would need to get out of your own house.
Oh, come on. No, you know what I mean.
I know.
I don't want people to have these weird prejudicial conceived notions of just who I am.
Yeah,
because of my lack
they
of-
might think atheists like, oh, he must have like a neon green streak in his hair.
I was told at a job a few years ago that I must be an immoral person simply because I didn't have a moral basis, but I was more moral than them because they cheated on their wife. So I don't, you know what I mean? It's confusing. I feel like I'm a moral person, but
Well, hey, let's actually. Did we already discuss this? But we actually had a kind of
pre-conversation.
yeah. All right, so authority, right? So we're seeing it now. And I was mentioning to him, do you understand how much wasted energy goes into political action? And I'm not saying political action isn't necessary, but you understand its role is a very loud voice, and it's very good information and feedback. If we have to go to the links to get them to do what they should have done a long time ago, and we've been asking them, this wouldn't be happening.
This is true, but they need to downplay it for whoever their base is. Everybody's got some kind of political strategy and stuff.
Right, but what I'm saying is, don't disregard politics, but you need to think outside of it, because that's a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
You can do all the revolutions you want. I had a friend unfriend me because she kept doing quotes from the French Revolution. You lunatic. Stop doing that shit. Cutting people's heads off does not solve anything.
No.
It doesn't.
And you can't.
It may be I don't know.
You're good. You can't legislate morality. No matter how much you want to put a law in the books to tell people what to do, they're going to be themselves. We've got to change the ideas behind how we operate so that when new people start coming up in the world, they don't have
Okay.
this negative perspective.
Here's a perfect example of how what government